the weekend, and we were at the beach, and she loves music and she loves to dance. So we're all socially distanced on the beach, and she hears the guy's got his radio or boombox going next to us, and she kind of hears the music and starts moseying over there just on her own, you know. Just smiling. What can you say? They loved it. We went, we're sorry. Oh no, that's great. Oh, so much fun.
Oh, you guys don't make you go again, Mike. Oh, I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
All right. Is Amy still there? Amy, are you still there? We're gonna have to call her again or something, or? Are we gonna have to call Amy again?
We should.
Is it on hold or something? Oh, Amy, are you still there? Okay, we're getting ready to gear up. Okay, fine.
Cold?
All right, let's get through the pre-agenda, and we do need to go into closed session. One is to discuss an economic development matter, and also to speak with our attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege. And I'll say right now that we're going to remove item B completely. There's still a few little questions that a couple council members have, and they're going to meet with Mr. Harrell and try to get those ironed out, and then have a fairly clean stormwater thing to present hopefully at the next meeting. And we'll put it on the regular agenda because there's been a lot of conversation about that. We may want to talk about that. So if anybody still has some concerns about that they'd like to discuss with Mr. Harrell, he's available. Of course, we won't have another meeting until the 20th or something of, is that what it is, 20th of July? We don't have one the week of the 4th. And then we're going to take the rules of procedure off. Some of you contacted me and said, boy, that was a lot to comprehend in a short period of time, and we're going to put that on a list that Mr. Smith and I are putting together. We're probably going to pick an agreeable day sometime in the next 45 to 60 days and maybe take the better part of a day to have a non-budget retreat where we'll talk about that and other big topics that are hard to discuss in a 1 hour period, and just take a day locally and go through all that. So that the rules of procedure will certainly be on that list. Item A on the consent agenda is to approve minutes from May 18th, 2020. John, you've talked to Brenda about what thoughts you had there?
One thing that I saw that was not in there was a brief discussion about Mr. Williams' digestive talents. And they don't need to be added into these minutes, but on page 4, we are now seeing the code of ethics that we are to follow, and I applaud that, and I would hope that we don't see a need for things like that in the future.
Well, I actually found a little typo. I read it a little more carefully than better. Yeah, good. So I mean, that's what I do. I just give them to Brenda and but I was proud of myself. I guess that's what I'm doing, bragging on myself now. Okay. Item C is to consider approving the award of labor, miscellaneous material, and equipment for construction of Delivery 6 to Carolina Power and Signalization in the amount of $882,852. And that continues the sort of the preliminary work for that. I asked John about that, John McClaga, and John says we're still operating well within our budget, which is probably going to be around $5 million by the time we're through with all of this, but we're still hanging in there, and I see he and Mr. Tucker are both shaking their heads. Any questions about that? This is located, if I'm not mistaken, in the vicinity or on the grounds of the Third Creek wastewater treatment facility. Okay, thank you. Item D is the annexation of the Fairfield Inn and Suites. You've seen that's well under construction, and we swapped out some things with them, some sidewalk considerations. They gave us some greenway, and the indication is that will be about a $9.5 million facility when it's completed. I hope people are able to occupy it soon thereafter, if not before. Next is another annexation request, and that is for Joy L. Lambert, who is the owner of 405 Bristol Drive, to receive the clerk's certificate of sufficiency and to consider approving a resolution setting the date of July 20th, 2020 for a public hearing on the question of the petitioned annexation. And that's the same date that we'll do the Fairfield Inn annexation as well. That's a .495 acre tract. And I don't know, is Steve, oh, Sherry, yeah, is that, why, is there, is there water kaplooey or something like, or what's the reason they wanted to be annexed?
The reason is they want to subdivide the property. I don't know how many of you knew, but Skylar Little, when he passed away, his house was 403 Bristol, and this was his rental house right beside of him. And so since he's passed away, his daughter wants to sell off those two properties and share in the water meter. So they want to split that and transfer title. Actually, Steve Irwin has already bought 405 from Skylar's daughter. And so anytime they need a new tap fee, and that is a correction I want to make on this council action request, they are not required to do a system development fee, but they are still required to pay the water tap of $525. So anytime they request utilities from the city, that's a voluntary annexation. So that's the reason for their request.
Okay, and the system development fee doesn't apply because they already had water to the property?
403 already has the meter, 405 needs a new water.
Okay.
Separate meter.
All right, very good. Any questions about that? And F is to consider approving second reading of text amendment TA 20-01 filed by Ms. Angela Imes, and that's the amendment to the adult child home daycare center issues. No changes to that from the last time? Okay. Are there any questions about that? And then finally, we have three leases that are coming due. The leases of G.L. Wilson, the leases of Ralph and J. Brown, and the lease of Katz. The Brown and Wilson leases were both with us originally. They were on our property, and that's why they're in a different format than the one with Katz. Katz was a lease that was in the big hangar that Statesville Flying Service built a couple years before we purchased the property from them. So that lease expired, and so we're actually renewing. The city of Statesville is a party to that lease for the first time, and that's a 10-year lease. And are there CPI? Are there every 3 years? Every 3 years in each of those leases, there's a CPI. Is that correct? In each of those, there's after 3 years, there's a CPI. Okay.
Costi, I had a couple questions on the one.
Okay, John, you might want to come up here so that if people are listening, they'll be able to hear you. Yes, sir.
The first one might go to Leah. On page 90 of our packet, it's section 3.6. The late fee is 18%. I know for residential, it can't be charged that much, but I just wanted to make sure that we're okay with that on a commercial lease. And David, you might know that answer too. Okay.
You see what he's asking, John? On page 90, section 3.6, delinquent payments, the late, they'll pay interest at
You can do it for commercial, but
1.5% per month, basically, for the year.
Okay, and then the other question I had was on page 92, section 5.2, the liability insurance. Again, I feel $1 million is severely uninsured, especially if they're out working on another jet and something catches fire or something, you're burning up a $3 or $4 million airplane. I just think $1 million is way lax of insurance for this.
They currently have $3 million. This is just saying that it won't go less than $1 million, but they currently carry $3 million of liability insurance.
Can we
Do you
adjust
think-
the contract to push it to 3
Yeah,
then?
do you think they would mind?
I can change that to 3.
All right.
I don't think they'll have an objection to that.
Okay,
And I think it sounds like enough of the council agrees with Mr. Stafford that maybe $1 million is low, and that we should begin uniformly around the city getting 2 or 3 or something more than $1 million.
Yeah, we will cover more than that million. That, and generally speaking, that's a minimum amount, but maybe we should just clarify more, that is, that in
Well,
this.
that one's easy enough. If they're already at 3 million, I'm sure they'll maintain it, and
Yeah.
that we don't have to get into
Yeah.
a fight over that. All right, very good. Thank you, John. All right, and then on the regular agenda, we'll have the second reading of the annexation request for 110 Vance P.O. Road. And depending on how that goes, we'll have well, let's see. Do we do that way this time, Sherry? Do we still do the annexation before we do the rezoning?
I would, because the rezoning is contingent upon the annexation.
Okay, so if we approve annexation, oh, I see, then you would approve rezoning. So, but if you don't approve annexation, then you forget about zoning. Okay, that's right, I knew that, I'm sorry. All right, then item 9 is the second reading of the rezoning request for that same property from Iredell County Community Business to R8MF, which is medium-density multifamily residential conditional use zone. All right, very good. Item 10 is to conduct a public hearing and consider approving a site plan, and this would be a quasi-judicial proceeding, P20-04, for the development of Cadence Statesville Senior Apartments located on Simonton Road. It's a project that at completion would be $17 million. Water and sewer would be provided by the city. Electric service is provided by Energy United. They may have as many as 161 new residents, and as I understand it, these are market rate. These are not. These are all market rate senior apartments. And because of the height, they had to have expanded setbacks, which they've met. And I believe the conditional use zoning was granted in 2002. So it's been pending, and they qualify in all of those areas. Sherry will share with us. Sherry and Leah have been reminding me of what the standard of review is. And I guess we'll just wait till you make that presentation to go over those, what the UDC and the standard for us to be determining during that hearing. And I think somebody from Cadence is going to be here. I mean, yeah, and one of the Presleys is going to be here, I believe. And just let me know if they're, and Brenda, let me know if there are others so we can get everybody sworn in during that time.
And then Mayor, I would like to, I spoke with Leah just so that council knows. Quasi-judicial does require some findings of fact. So I did print out the section of the ordinance. Leah and I talked that when you make your motion, you really need to base it on this standard of the ordinance. Section D, and so you'll read that. It's just a finding the fact that you need to make. And so in order to deny a site plan that's already got their conditional rezoning approval, you have to have findings of fact to make that denial. And that
Right.
includes testimony and evidence from the adjoining property owners. They would have to present that. So it's not just a legislative up and down, I don't like the plan. It's you have to make a finding of fact, and if to deny it, you have to justify those findings of fact for the record. So just want to prepare you for that, for this particular hearing.
They're able to go in there by right, so we're just looking at the site plan. Correct? Okay.
That's correct. They meet the conditions of their conditional use rezoning that they filed for back in 2002 and were approved for.
Okay.
All right. Number 12 is based on our conversation, I guess, at the last meeting. They've come up with, I guess, a short-term proposal for the terms, conditions, and rate for the interfund loan from the electric fund to the airport fund. And what they have done is the interest that has accrued since, that would have been due January the 31st of 2020, will be paid at 2.5% because that's what the agreement was until that, well, until now, as a matter of fact. And then what they've done is they have blended the rate, assuming approval, so that the amount due, and this is on page, well, page 159, the blended rate for the payment due next January would be 1.63%. And then what the proposal is to begin accruing interest at the rate of 1% upon approval of this arrangement. Look at this again at the end of 2021, and also in the interim, should we continue, that would reduce our principal payments from $304,000 plus to $273,000 plus. So it sort of incorporates what we had discussed last time, but it also lets us take a look at the end of next calendar year to see if we want to continue on that basis, or if the market conditions are such that we would increase the interest rate. But it was time to get on with the program and to start getting the money back in the electric fund. We're fine there. John's okay. He has heart failure from time to time, but he's still okay financially. But we just wanted to incorporate what the council had come up with, and I commend Mr. Tucker and Mr. McLagan Smith for doing that. Are there questions about that? So it basically is 2.5% until we get it approved, and then it'll be dropped down to 1%, and they'll make those interest-only payments. And then at the end of those two interest-only payments, if we don't change things, you see what the schedule is, and it's a declining payment based on the loan amount less and adding the interest due on an annual basis. Okay? Everybody okay with that? Next, again, is another revisit, and this is one from the last time where DOT is going to relocate. We need to relocate our water and sewer lines, and in conjunction with Interstate Project I-3819B. And you'll see that, and again, this is something we were responsible for. We went to Representative Rena Turner while she was in there, because the last time this happened, we got kind of hoodooed. I think it was 50-50. We ended up paying a lot of money for us to relocate lines that were serving our citizens just fine. So now, because of the size of our community, the maximum they can charge us is 25%. And also, if the lines were in place before a certain time, then they pay 100%. So in this case, 25% of the lines that we have to relocate is $351,569. Also, we are going to the staff is asking us to upsize a sewer line that crosses I-40 from a 15-inch to a 24-inch, and that would be, our part of that would be $149,000. Well, not our part. Our cost to upsize the line from a 15 to a 24 would be $149,000.
Costi, I had two questions on that I wasn't sure if that could move to the consent possibly, but I had, the one question was for Scott, and that is there any logic at all to even upsizing that line's going to serve the entire northeastern quadrant, correct? Is there any logic at all in upsizing that to an even larger size where it passes under the freeway so we never have to deal with that?
Currently, that pipe is a 15-inch sewer pipe, and it serves everything up Crawford Road, the auto auction, and the rest area, everything up that northeast quadrant. A 24 more or less triples the capacity of that pipe, and the 15 is not at capacity now. This is just an opportunity to the best of our ability, I don't hate to say future-proof, but give us a whole lot of development potential. The most expensive part of the line is the part under the interstate. We would still have
Right.
you still have a 15-inch line on either side, but that.
So it would make no sense to punch a 30-inch through under the freeway and then go back to a smaller size on either.
We did, I mean, a 24 has got the capacity to.
Is plenty of capacity?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was my only question on that.
Well, then let me ask, on that one and the previous one, would there be any objection to moving either of those to consent? Number 12, which is the electric fund loan to the airport.
I've got questions on the
Okay.
electric.
Everybody okay with that? All right, let's move 12 and 13 to the consent. And item 14 is,
Costi, so 12 is staying on the regular and 13's moving?
no, 12 and 13 are both moving to consent.
I've got questions on the airport fund, on that interest rate and so forth. Sure. I don't remember in our discussion where we lowered that to a 1% rate. A question I would have to Leah is, can we charge that low of a rate to ourselves? And then, should we not visit, the way I look at this is, if the electric fund has $6 million extra dollars that they don't need for 22 years, that they can lend out to us, to the city, in essence, we've taken $6 million too much from our citizens in electric fees, that really they should be reimbursed it. But not given that, I'd like it to be a fair market rate, or at least close to it, on the airport. I understand we're trying to get the legs under the airport, but what happens if we revisit that interest rate in, say, 2 or 3 year intervals?
Well, it says right now we will revisit it at the end of 2021 already. So we're really, I mean,
And then are we gonna, do we have a way of setting it, what we're gonna set it to at that point?
yeah, we can set it,
It's basically meant to revisit it and refinance as you see fit.
yeah, it says specifically that this rate is, well, it could be effective for 22 years, but it says that we're going to look at it again at the end of 21. By calendar year end 21, we'll reevaluate the whole thing.
While we didn't speak earlier in terms of specific interest rates, I think this was an attempt to address the concerns that we expressed earlier, and that was the declining in fuel sales in the time lapse between now and the time rental income goes up.
It
From
was
one
in
of the leases we approved today and one that's in discussion now about to be signed.
You're exactly right. It was in response to the concerns about not having the ability to service the debt and try to get that down
Right.
a little bit.
This proposal addresses those concerns, so I'm completely happy with it. I do appreciate Mr. Stafford's concern about the interest rate, and I think that we can address that
And, yeah,
at the appropriate time. But
would you rather still leave it?
No, that's good. I'm good with, and the only other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to this body about putting the lid on that cookie jar,
On what?
on that cookie jar. I do not, I'd like to not see us taking loans out of the electric fund
Well,
in the future for,
I'm not saying there's not some of the money that has been generated by revenues exceeding expenses, but a lot of it has been generated over the last 3 years with about 4 rate reductions where we granted rate relief but also put money in reserve. And on July 1st, we're anticipating another nearly $9 million as a result of the relationship that Electricities has with Duke Energy and a way that we were. So you're right, but some of it has been not, I mean, we'll take credit for great management, but the thing that has been great management was our relationship with Electricities has provided a lot of that.
right.
Because some of it's there for AMI and other expansion of this Delivery 6 and a lot of things there. But you're exactly right. If we got $6 million that we know we're not going to need for 22 years, then we should have other plans for it. I agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so we'll take 12 and 13 and put them on the consent agenda. All right, 14, this is, I think this is great news. This is for the water line extension at Larkin Commerce Park and to approve Budget Amendment 24. Basically, Scott, we'll let you brag about that at 7 o'clock, but you can see there they have vetted Fuller and Company, who has done a lot of work, I understand, for CMUD, which is Charlotte Mecklenburg Utility District, and their price, well, all the prices actually were significantly lower than what we anticipated. So I think Mr. Smith was right. The question to our engineers is, how are you so high to start with? But obviously $2.3 million is a couple of $1 million, if not more than a couple $1 million less than we anticipated spending. So we'll be asking for approval of that and approving Budget Amendment 24. I'd like to leave that there just so that the citizens will know that we got them a pretty good deal on a project. Okay. We have a series of appointments to various boards and commissions. There are 2 positions up on the Airport Commission, and Dr. Salzman and Mr. David Alexander are both on there now and have asked to be reappointed. There are other folks that have submitted applications. I guess I would ask the Johnson brothers, are you all happy with the performance of those 2 people? And,
Yeah.
all right, does it? Well, I want to just see if others have other persons they would like to nominate for that board. If not, that's why I'm taking them one at a time, because we might be able to put some of them on consent. I'm going to put that on consent then, with everybody's permission. All right. The next one is 2 regular members and 1 alternate member to the Board of Adjustment. And Billy Winters would like to be reappointed, but we still have a vacancy for another regular member and an alternate member. And what we learned, just so you'll know, Justin Phillips and Judd Pitticock, or whatever, I need to put my glasses on, both, we checked, and Mr. Phillips is a school teacher in Mooresville, and he lives in Larkin, but he would not be able to attend midday meetings. But he's also a candidate for the planning board. I guess that leaves us, though, we'd still be short, I believe. So it looks, I mean, if nobody has any objection, I know the county does this a lot. You fill what you can and then you go back to the drawing board. But if everybody is okay, we could put Jed Pidcock on as the member and leave the alternate open, because Mr. Phillips, as I said, can't come to midday meetings. That's, I mean, that's the only, right now, that's the only choice that we've got, unless we don't want to appoint either one of those people.
I mean, this Pidcock guy didn't say if he could go to a daytime meeting, yes or no.
I'm sorry, say that again. Well, I think I asked Brenda to follow up, and she did, or April to follow up. And I think we confirmed that Mr. Phillips could not attend, even though he said he could, but Pidcock can't. Right, that's the request. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, if you're okay with that, then we'll put that on the consent. All right, next is design review, and that's another one where Brian George and Chuck Good are eligible for reappointment. Well, I guess everybody's eligible for reappointment. We don't have any term limits. And there aren't any other applications there either. So is everybody okay with reappointing those two guys?
I am. Gonna put it on the consent also.
Yep. So we put the airport, we put, okay. All right, next is the planning board. And Bernard Robertson would like to be reappointed. Brian Long would not like to be reappointed. So we need one. Oh, I guess the question is everybody okay? Well, this is where there may be some discussion. All right, now, Pidcock will not be available because we will be appointing him to the Board of Adjustment. So there are, so there are three other persons, Alicia Cordell, Dr. Glasgow, and Justin Phillips, that have expressed interest in that position. So why don't we leave that one where it is, and we'll see what applications there are there. And then finally, stormwater. There are 4 people who I think all have served very well, from what I can tell: David Reese, Steve Knight, Mary Catherine Harbin, and Dan Pope. They would all ask to be reappointed. Joe Hudson, our retired Joe Hudson, is on there for one of the positions. And Presley Maddox, whose name was in another location, had put down stormwater as one that he would be interested in. So we needed 2. We only had, and we have 2. We have Presley Maddox and Joe Hudson. So if you would agree to reappoint the 4 that I mentioned that are already serving, and then appoint Joe Hudson and Presley Maddox as 2 new members there, then we would have that taken care of. Is that satisfactory?
Yep.
Everybody okay with that? All right.
I'll move it to consent.
Huh?
I'll move it to the consent.
Yeah, we'll move that to consent. Okay. And then, all right, then that's it. So let's have a motion, please.
And
I'm sorry.
just on that stormwater, for clarification, is it typical that you would have 6 members roll at one time? Or do we need to,
Stagger that.
is there a reason that we're almost
question.
replacing the entire board at one?
It wasn't set up, it was a little more balanced, and this way we would have 6 at one time. There are 3 other members, I believe, 2 or 3 other members that they've been on 1 year, so they still have 2 years remaining on their term. So yeah, we would have none rotated off next year, 2 the following year, and then 6 the year after that. It's a little unbalanced. Chances are we'll have some turnover in the meantime. We've already learned one of the non-voting members, the planning board liaison, was Brian Long, so we have to be replacing him when we get a recommendation from the planning board. And just chances are during the year.
Okay.
during
It
the
just
year.
seemed like a bunch of them at one time. Yeah.
They've been a very engaged group. No one volunteered for a shorter term. So
Okay.
they've done a good job, so we want to keep them on.
Thank you, Scott.
Good question. All right. We'll entertain a motion to go in closed session to discuss an economic development matter
I'll make that motion.
and to consult with our attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege. Okay, motion and second.
make it.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're in closed session. Thank you. Ask everyone to leave for a few minutes, please, while we go into closed session.